I always thought loyalty meant something in our family. Like, more than just a word we threw around at Sunday dinners. We weren't warm, exactly, not in a huggy, confessional kind of way, but we had this unspoken understanding that when it came down to it, we had each other's backs. Blood before business. That kind of thing. So when I say I never saw it coming, I mean that in the most brutal way possible. I thought we were building something together. Turns out I was just building it for them. It started about 2 years ago, during one of those long, stale winter stretches where nothing changes unless you make it change. I was working late most nights, juggling invoicing, supplier calls, and prototype sketches at the shop. We ran a family-owned woodworking business, small batch, custom designs, kitchen islands, one-off furniture commissions, that kind of thing. My dad started it 30 years ago. I came on board first, right out of college. My younger brother joined a couple years later after quitting his job in finance. I handled the craft. He handled the numbers. Or so I thought. There was this one night, I remember it because my fingers were freezing even though the heat was on full blast. I was sketching out an idea for modular shelving units that could be customized online. Sort of like IKEA but upscale, clean, American-made. A direct-to-consumer concept, with just-in-time inventory and online configuration. I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up late mapping out the whole thing. Website flows, pricing tiers, marketing angles. It felt like the future of our business. Scalable, fresh, actually exciting. I brought it to them the next morning, all buzzed from lack of sleep and too much hope. My brother looked impressed. My dad, more cautious. He said it sounded complicated. Said the logistics alone would drown us. But over the next few weeks, they warmed to it, at least, I thought they did. We started tossing ideas back and forth. I drafted a concept deck. My brother cleaned it up and added some financial projections. We even looked at warehousing options. It felt like we were on the same page, maybe for the first time in years. Then, out of nowhere, my dad called a strategy meeting. That was already a red flag. He never used phrases like that. He said it with this stiffness, like he'd rehearsed it. We met at his house. Just me, my dad, and my brother. I remember the smell of that room, pine cleaner and stale coffee. My stomach turned before they even started talking. My brother took the lead. Said they'd been thinking things through and decided to move forward with the expansion. But, he paused, not with me at the helm. Not even on the team. Said I was too reactive, too invested emotionally, and that this phase of the business required strategic detachment. I didn't even know what that meant. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for my dad to chime in and say it was a joke, or at least that they wanted me involved somehow. But my dad just nodded along. Didn't even look at me. I asked if they were serious. My voice cracked when I said it, which probably didn't help my case. My brother didn't flinch. He leaned forward, steepled his fingers like he was in some boardroom somewhere instead of our living room, and said, "We think you're too close to it. You get worked up. You take things personally." I just sat there, stunned. Like I'd stepped into someone else's life for a second and couldn't figure out how to get back. They were taking my idea, the thing I bled over for weeks, and running with it, without me. And they were dressing it up like they were doing me a favor. I asked, "So what am I supposed to do?" My dad shrugged. "Keep running the shop. Stay focused on what you're good at." Like that was some kind of compliment. I left without saying much else. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing how gutted I was. But the second I got into my truck, I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white, throat burning. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, it was the spin. They weren't stabbing me in the back. No, they were managing me. They turned my passion into a liability, my investment into a weakness. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't part of the family the way I thought I was. I was a resource. A tool they could set down when they found something sharper. For a while, I convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. That maybe I'd overreacted. That I'd wake up to a phone call from my dad saying it was just poor wording, or that my brother didn't mean to make it sound so final. But the call never came. And the longer the silence stretched, the more I started to realize it wasn't some slip-up. It was a decision. A clean cut, made deliberately, with no intention of revisiting it. The shop became unbearable after that. Every tool, every workbench, every order form reminded me of how hard I'd worked to keep that place afloat. Through slow winters, supply chain delays, flaky clients, I stuck it out. And now, the reward for that loyalty was a pat on the head and a "stay focused on what you're good at." Like they were handing me a consolation prize. I tried reaching out once. I sent my brother a text, something short and neutral: "Hey, if there's still a way I can be involved, even just consulting, I'd love to help." He replied a day later with, "Appreciate that, but we've got it covered." No warmth. No opening. Just a wall. Around that time, I noticed the shift. Group chats slowed down. Calls went unanswered. My dad stopped dropping by the shop, which was unheard of. He used to swing through 3-4 times a week, even just to check inventory or drop off coffee. Now it was like he didn't want to be seen. Thanksgiving rolled around, and for the first time in my life, I didn't get an invite. My mom passed years ago, so holidays were always smaller, just the three of us, maybe a cousin or two if they were in town. I ended up eating leftover pizza and watching reruns alone. I told myself it was fine, that I didn't care, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept going over every conversation we'd ever had about the business, wondering what parts were real and what had been performance. There was one night, maybe 2 weeks after that meeting, when I remembered something that didn't sit right. A conversation from earlier that year, back when I first started sketching out the modular shelving idea. I'd shown my brother a mock-up, and he lit up, said, "This could change everything." He'd asked if I'd written any of it down formally, for investors or something. I said no, I wanted to keep it in-house for now. And he'd nodded like that made sense. But now, remembering his tone, something about it felt off. Like he was already thinking a few moves ahead, keeping his cards close. I started going through old emails, texts, anything that could help me figure out when they decided to shut me out. I found a chain from 6 months back where I'd outlined the shelving system in detail. Diagrams, pricing models, material sourcing, the whole thing. My brother had replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No feedback, no questions. At the time, I thought he was just busy. But now I saw it differently. He wasn't ignoring me. He was collecting. From there, the suspicion grew. I started wondering how long they'd been planning this. If the whole "you're too emotional" thing was just an excuse to get me out of the way. I started to feel like I was losing my grip, not just on the business, but on reality. Like everything I'd believed about my role in this family had been rewritten when I wasn't looking. I went through a phase where I tried to prove them wrong. I worked 12, 14-hour days, turning out orders like a machine. I redesigned the showroom, ran promos, updated the website. Every time a client left happy, I'd think, "See, I'm not the problem. I'm not unstable. I'm not emotional." But none of it mattered. They'd already decided who I was. And they weren't looking back. Eventually, I stopped trying. The silence from them became normal. I stopped checking the group chats. Stopped texting. Stopped hoping. I just buried myself in routine: wake up, make coffee, go to the shop, crank out commissions, sleep. Repeat. But there was still one thing I hadn't done. I hadn't looked at what they were actually doing with the expansion. I told myself I didn't care. But the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid that they were building something brilliant without me. That they'd take my idea and make it sing, and that maybe, just maybe, they were right to cut me out. Then one night, an old college buddy of mine sent me a link out of nowhere. Said he thought I'd find it interesting. I clicked it, half distracted, expecting an article or a dumb meme. What I saw made my stomach drop. It was a pitch deck. Public-facing, polished, slick. A direct-to-consumer furniture startup. Same product. Same philosophy. Same damn name I'd sketched on a napkin 6 months earlier. And my name was nowhere on it. I stared at the screen so long my eyes went dry. It was like watching a version of my own brain get paraded around by strangers. The branding was different, cleaner, more startup-friendly, but the bones of it were mine. The modular shelving. The online customization tool. The just-in-time delivery model. Even the little copy about reclaiming space through craftsmanship was lifted from one of my early drafts. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. I just sat there in my kitchen, laptop glowing in the dark, trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I'd seen. But the deeper I went, the worse it got. They had a full website up. Instagram ads. A launch countdown. They were raising money through some slick crowdfunding platform. And every quote, every testimonial, every mention of the vision, it was my brother's name. I checked the team page. My brother was listed as co-founder and CEO. There was a designer I didn't recognize, probably someone they brought in to clean up the interface. And my dad, was listed as strategic advisor. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept refreshing the page, looking for anything that would link me to it, any scrap of credit or mention. Nothing. It was like I'd never existed. The next morning, I called my brother. I didn't text. I didn't want to give him time to craft some polished response. I needed to hear his voice. He answered on the third ring, all chipper and fake friendly, like we hadn't been icing each other out for months. I asked him what the hell was going on. Tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel it shaking. He paused, then sighed like I was some problem he'd hoped wouldn't come back. Said, "Look, man. I get that you're upset. But you didn't follow through. You had the idea, sure, but you didn't build it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told him I had built it. I'd spent months putting that system together. I'd worked it out piece by piece, sourcing, design, logistics. He said, "Yeah, but you never packaged it. You never brought it to market. That's the difference." I could feel my face burning. My jaw locked up so hard I thought a tooth might crack. I asked him if he really believed what he was saying or if he'd just convinced himself it was true so he wouldn't have to feel guilty. He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "You always do this. You get dramatic, you act like everything's a betrayal. But the truth is, we couldn't wait around for you to catch up. It wasn't personal. Not personal." He said it like he believed it. Like gutting someone and wearing their skin to a pitch meeting was just business. I hung up before I could say something I'd regret. Or maybe I just didn't want to hear any more. I sat in the shop that afternoon staring at my workbench, trying to make sense of the last year. The missed calls, the backhanded compliments, the subtle distancing. It hadn't been random. It was strategy. They'd been slowly phasing me out, and I was too loyal, too trusting, to see it happening. That night, I printed out every email, text, and draft file I had related to the project. Not because I planned to sue, I didn't have that kind of energy, but because I needed to know. I needed proof that I hadn't imagined it. That I wasn't crazy. I went through my notes, time-stamped files, photo logs of prototypes. Everything pointed to one truth: I'd built the foundation. Every piece they were now profiting from started with me. And they'd wiped me clean from the story like I was never there. The worst part was the silence from my dad. He knew. He had to. I kept waiting for a call, some kind of explanation. But nothing came. Not a word. Like he'd finally decided which son he was betting on, and it wasn't me. I almost called him. I had the phone in my hand 3 separate times. But what was I supposed to say? "Hey Dad, why'd you let them erase me?" Would he even acknowledge it? Instead, I called an old friend from college, Derek, who'd gone into business law. Asked him if there was anything I could do. He said maybe, if I had documentation. I sent him the files. He called back the next day and said, "Yeah, this is bad. Not just morally, but legally. They're using your IP. That word, your, hit hard. I hadn't heard it in weeks. For a second, I felt seen. Then the anger came rushing back. I asked him what my options were. He said we could draft a cease and desist, or even a licensing demand. Nothing that would go to court yet, just something that made it clear I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I told him to do it. But that didn't make me feel better either. It just made it real. They didn't see me as a partner. They didn't even see me as a person. I was just the guy in the garage with the good ideas. And once they had what they wanted, they cut the cord and moved on. The letter went out 2 days later. Clean. Professional. Non-threatening, but firm. Derek had worded it carefully, citing the IP usage, the documented drafts, the timeline. It basically said, "We know what you did. We have proof. Let's not make this ugly." I thought sending it might rattle them. Maybe force a phone call. An apology. Some kind of reckoning. Instead, nothing. No response. No email. Not even a call from my dad. Just silence. Cold, corporate silence, like I wasn't family anymore. Just a legal threat they could ignore. Then, like clockwork, the passive-aggressive stuff started. My cousin posted on Facebook about how proud he was of the boys taking the family business to the next level. Someone tagged me in the comments like they assumed I was involved. I didn't reply. I just sat there, watching this fake narrative grow legs. The version where I never existed. The one where it had always been just the two of them. I tried to focus on work, but everything felt poisoned. I'd go to sand a table and catch myself staring off, jaw clenched, replaying conversations in my head. Imagining what I should have said. What I should have done when I first noticed the shift. How I'd handed them everything and then stepped back like an idiot. I almost went public. I wrote out a whole post, laid out the timeline, screenshots, design files, early prototypes with my signature in the corner. I hovered over the post button for what felt like hours. My hand actually shook. Not from fear, more like heartbreak. Like pressing it would make all of it final. There'd be no walking it back. No more pretending it could be fixed. In the end, I didn't do it. Not because I was scared. But because I realized they'd already made up their minds. Going public wouldn't get me justice. It wouldn't get me my idea back. It would just prove their point, that I was the emotional one. The loose cannon. The guy who made things personal. Instead, I called my dad. He picked up after 2 rings. No hello. Just silence, like he was waiting for me to speak first. I asked him if we could meet. Said I didn't want to yell, I just wanted answers. He agreed. Sounded tired, like he already regretted saying yes. We met at this old diner on the edge of town. Place hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked booths. Same oversalted fries. He was already sitting when I walked in. No smile. No hug. Just a nod and a sip of coffee. I sat down across from him and asked, straight up, why did you let them take it? He looked at me for a long time before answering. Finally said, it was never going to work with you involved. Not like this. Like what? I asked. I kept my voice low, steady. With me being the one who created it. He shook his head slowly. With you being the way you are. You overthink. You take things to heart. That works in the shop. It doesn't work in business. That word again, business. Like it excused everything. Like it meant betrayal was just part of the game. I told him I wasn't going to sit there and be gaslit. That what they did wasn't just strategy, it was theft. He sighed, put his cup down, and said something I'll never forget, we protected you. You wouldn't have survived what this next step requires. I just stared at him. Like he was speaking another language. He went on. This wasn't about stealing. It was about moving forward. You've got a good thing here. Keep it. Let us do our thing. I sat there, jaw tight, blinking back whatever emotion was trying to surface. Rage. Grief. I don't even know anymore. I just stood up, nodded once, and said, you didn't protect me. You cut me out. There's a difference. Then I walked out. Didn't look back. For the first time, I really saw it. The lines they'd drawn. The story they were sticking to. I wasn't emotional, I was inconvenient. And instead of dealing with me, they wrote me out. I didn't sleep much that night. But I felt clear in a way I hadn't in months. Like I finally understood what had happened. Not just the surface version, but the rot underneath. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what came next. It had been about 3 months since that diner conversation. I'd settled into this numb routine, working smaller jobs, mostly custom commissions. I stopped watching what they were doing online. Unfollowed, muted, blocked the pages. I told myself it was about peace, but really, it was survival. Every update felt like a knife in the ribs. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from Matt, an old friend from high school. We hadn't talked in years, but he knew I was involved in woodworking and business stuff. He sent me a voice memo, something casual, upbeat. Hey man, I just saw this announcement about Oak Frame getting acquired. Wild. Didn't know your brother was selling already. Congrats, I guess. I replayed it 3 times before the words even registered. Acquired. Selling. I googled the company name, the same name they stole from my napkin sketches, and there it was. Press release. Local business media coverage. Even a short blurb in a national startup newsletter. The brand had been acquired by a mid-sized interior design firm looking to scale a direct-to-consumer furniture line. The deal had closed 2 weeks ago. The release quoted my brother extensively. Talked about his vision, his leadership, his innovative product model. There was a line about their family roots. A mention of our dad as a steady guiding hand. And me? Nothing. Not even a shadow. I sat in the dark of my office, fingers frozen on the keyboard. My stomach twisted itself into a knot so tight I thought I might throw up. I clicked through every article, every announcement, every investor update I could find. They all told the same story, my brother, the self-starter. The innovator. The entrepreneur who built something from scratch. They sold my idea. The entire business. Flipped it for what looked like mid-6 figures, possibly more with back-end incentives. I had no way of knowing the exact number. But enough that my brother had already moved to Austin, according to his LinkedIn. My dad had apparently retired, though I doubted it was out of necessity. Probably just a strategic exit. And the worst part? The expansion, it was never meant to last. They never planned to build it. They used my design, my vision, my pitch, to inflate the company's value, get attention, attract buyers. Then they cashed out. Clean. Final. I didn't even get the courtesy of a heads up. It wasn't just theft. It was theater. They dressed up the business with my work, sold the costume, and disappeared before I could even catch my breath. Every meeting I'd missed, every silence I'd endured, every family dinner I hadn't been invited to, it all made sense now. It wasn't about me being too emotional. It was about me being the only one who might have said no. They knew I wouldn't go along with it. So they made sure I never got the chance. I closed the laptop. Just sat there, staring at the wall. It was quiet. Too quiet. No vindication, no justice, no cinematic rage. Just a hollow kind of betrayal that seeped into my bones. And that was it. No calls. No apologies. No explanations. Just silence. And somewhere out there, my brother was probably raising a glass with my dad, celebrating a future they bought using the parts of me they didn't think were worth keeping.